Let me ask you something. When was the last time you woke up in the morning and the very first thing you thought about was you? Not a text you had to answer. Not someone else's mood. Not a conversation you were still replaying from last night. I'm talking about waking up and realizing every single decision you make today, every hour you own is yours. No compromises, no negotiations, no one telling you what you should do, how you should feel, or who you should be. Now here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Most of the stress, the noise, and the emotional chaos in your life isn't coming from the world. It's coming from the people you've allowed into your space. We've been taught to believe that being alone is a weakness, that if you're single, something's wrong with you, that if you choose solitude, you're avoiding life. But here's what they don't tell you. Some of the most powerful, fulfilled, and unstoppable people you'll ever meet built their life, their peace, and their success by mastering the art of living alone. So before you roll your eyes and say, that's not for me, I'm going to show you why living alone might just be the single greatest advantage you'll ever have. And why once you taste that freedom, you'll never go back. Because if you can stand on your own 2 feet without leaning on anyone, you can walk into any room, any relationship, any challenge, untouchable. And we're going to talk about exactly how to get there. People throw the word freedom around like it's a motivational poster. They talk about freedom as if it's just a slogan you slap on a coffee mug or a t-shirt. But I want you to think about what it actually means in the context of your life. Freedom means the ability to make a decision without hesitation, without needing permission, without explaining yourself to anyone. Freedom means waking up and doing what's right for you, not what someone else expects from you. And here's the thing, most people don't have that. They think they do. They tell themselves, I'm an independent person. But in reality, they're constantly adjusting, constantly negotiating, constantly compromising just to keep the peace in their relationship. And over time, those small compromises add up. You start to trade pieces of yourself away. One day you wake up and realize you've built a life around avoiding conflict instead of pursuing what you really want. Living alone strips all of that away. There's no one to check in with before you take a risk. No one to convince that your crazy new idea might work. No one to guilt trip you because you came home late working on your goals. Instead of sitting on the couch watching a show you don't even like. You move faster because you're not dragging someone else's expectations behind you. And speed matters. Momentum matters. The world doesn't wait for you to get approval from your partner before it gives you an opportunity. Think about this. Every time you have to explain yourself to someone else, you're slowing down your decision-making muscle. You're diluting your instincts. And instincts are like any other skill. The more you hesitate, the weaker they get. Living alone forces you to trust your gut, to pull the trigger, to own your choices, whether they succeed or fail. That's real freedom. And let's talk about resources, your time, your money, your energy. When you live alone, every single one of those resources is directed exactly where you want it to go. You don't have to budget around someone else's spending habits. You don't have to share your weekend with plans you didn't actually want to make. You don't have to waste emotional energy on fights about who's doing enough chores or who's pulling their weight. You are the only one responsible for your ship. And when you're the captain, you set the course. That kind of control changes you. You start saying yes to things you would have avoided before because you're not worried about how someone else will react. You start taking bigger risks because there's no safety net you're afraid of losing. You start learning faster because you're not stopping to translate every new insight into a language that keeps the peace with someone else. And this isn't about being selfish. It's about finally putting your priorities in the driver's seat. Too many people spend years, decades putting someone else's comfort ahead of their own growth. Then they wake up at 40, 50, 60 years old, realizing they've been a supporting character in their own life story. Living alone is the ultimate way to make sure you're the main character every single day. It also removes the invisible weight you don't even realize you're carrying in a relationship. I'm talking about the constant low-level awareness of another person's emotional state. Even in good relationships, you're always scanning, are they happy? Are they upset? Did I do something wrong? Are we okay? That mental background noise steals focus from your work, your passions, your peace. When you live alone, that noise disappears. You get back mental bandwidth you didn't even know you were missing. And the irony is, once you experience that, you realize how much energy you were wasting on things that didn't move you forward. You realize how much more you could have accomplished if you'd had that clarity earlier. You realize that all those little compromises were actually giant roadblocks slowing you down year after year. Some people are terrified of this level of freedom. They won't admit it, but they're afraid of the responsibility. Because here's the flip side. When you live alone, there's no one else to blame. If you don't chase your goals, that's on you. If you waste your time, there's no one else to point the finger at. That's why this kind of freedom isn't for everyone. It exposes whether you're actually serious about the life you say you want. But if you are serious, it's the most powerful state you can be in. You start to understand that your time is the most valuable currency you have. And you spend it like an investor, not like someone trying to keep a relationship afloat. You put it into things that pay you back, building skills, building health, building wealth, building experiences that make you stronger and sharper. And because no one else is setting the pace for you, you get there faster. You also learn the truth about your own resilience. You see yourself solve problems you didn't think you could solve. You realize you can fix things, handle emergencies, make decisions, all without leaning on someone else. That's the kind of confidence you can't fake. It's earned. And once you have it, you become unshakable. This is why freedom is your greatest asset, because it compounds. Every decision you make for yourself builds the muscle to make the next decision, even faster, even bolder. Every hour you control builds momentum that carries into the next project, the next opportunity, the next breakthrough. You're not just living alone, you're living on your terms. And once you taste that, no relationship, no situation, no person can take it from you unless you hand it over willingly. That's the real danger, not being alone, but forgetting what you're capable of when you are. Once you understand that freedom isn't just the absence of control from others, but the active ownership of your own life, you'll protect it like it's oxygen. Because that's exactly what it is, the thing that keeps you breathing, moving, and alive in a world that's constantly trying to tell you who to be. And if you can hold on to that, you'll never settle for anything that costs you more than it gives you. There's a certain strength that comes from knowing no one's coming to save you. It's not fear. It's not loneliness. It's clarity. When you understand that every challenge, every problem, every obstacle you face is yours to handle, something clicks inside you. You stop waiting. You stop making excuses. You stop blaming the timing, the economy, your upbringing, your partner, your boss, or anyone else. You take ownership, and in that moment you become dangerous in the best possible way. Living alone is like a boot camp for that mindset. When the sink breaks, you fix it or you figure out how to get it fixed. When the bills come, you pay them or you deal with the consequences. When you're sick, there's no one to run to the pharmacy for you. You get up, you push through, you handle it. And every time you do, you add another layer of armor to who you are. That's not just survival, that's training. That's building the kind of self-reliance most people never develop because they've never had to. When you live with someone, it's easy to lean, even if you don't mean to. You start splitting responsibilities. You start outsourcing your emotional support. You start relying on another person to fill gaps. You should be filling yourself. It feels harmless at first, but slowly it erodes your ability to operate independently. You don't notice until the moment you're forced to stand alone, and then you realize how many of your basic survival skills have atrophied. Living alone removes that crutch. It forces you to be both the architect and the builder of your life. You become the person who plans, executes, and adjusts. You learn to trust your ability to solve problems without a safety net. And here's the thing. Once you've proven to yourself that you can handle everything, you stop fearing anything. The unknown doesn't intimidate you anymore because you've trained yourself to figure it out. Self-reliance isn't just about fixing broken things or paying bills. It's about emotional resilience. When you live alone, you learn how to process your own emotions without using another person as a constant sounding board. You become your own therapist, your own motivator, your own anchor. That doesn't mean you never talk to people or that you isolate yourself. It means you develop the ability to regulate your own mental state without needing someone else to constantly prop you up. Most people avoid being alone because they're scared of their own thoughts. They don't like the silence, because in the silence, all the insecurities, doubts, and fears they've been avoiding show up. But when you live alone, you can't escape that. You face it head on, and little by little, those fears lose their power over you. You learn how to sit with discomfort until it stops controlling you. You learn how to shift your state on command. You learn how to motivate yourself when there's no one around to clap for you. That is an elite skill, and it's rare. And here's where it gets even more powerful. When you've built that kind of self-reliance, you become unshakable in the presence of others. You're not desperate for attention because you're comfortable without it. You're not manipulated by guilt because you don't need approval to feel secure. You're not afraid of losing someone because you've already proven to yourself that you can thrive alone. That makes you incredibly hard to control. And the truth is, some people won't like that, because once you have self-reliance, you stop being easy to manipulate, and not everyone benefits from you being strong. Self-reliance also sharpens your decision-making. When you know you're the one who's going to deal with the consequences of your choices, good or bad, you start thinking differently. You weigh options more clearly, you act with more intention, and you move with purpose. You stop making choices just to please someone else. Every decision becomes a direct investment in your own future, because you're the one who has to live with the results. There's also a certain pride that comes from knowing you can stand on your own. It's not arrogance, it's quiet confidence. The kind of confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. It's in the way you walk into a room, the way you hold yourself in a crisis, the way you don't flinch when something unexpected happens because you've been here before, you've handled worse, and you know you'll handle this too. Living alone gives you endless opportunities to practice that. You'll have days when everything goes wrong, the car won't start, your deadline's coming up, the bills are higher than you expected, and there's no one to share the load. And those days will feel heavy, but they're also the days you grow the most. Because when you get through them, you don't just survive, you prove to yourself again that you are capable of far more than you think. People talk a lot about independence, but most of what they mean is financial independence. And while money matters, true independence is deeper. It's the ability to stand emotionally, mentally, and physically on your own 2 feet. It's knowing that you can create stability from chaos, build something from nothing, and carry yourself forward no matter what life throws at you. That's what living alone teaches you, if you lean into it instead of running from it. The other gift of self-reliance is freedom from neediness. When you don't need someone to survive, every relationship you choose is because you want it, not because you're desperate for it. That changes the entire dynamic. You stop tolerating toxic behavior. You stop compromising your values just to keep someone around. You stop trading your peace for companionship, because you know without a doubt that your life is already full, and anyone who steps into it needs to add value, not drain it. Self-reliance is like a shield. It doesn't mean nothing will ever hurt you. It means nothing will ever destroy you. And the only way to build that shield is to put yourself in situations where you're forced to use it. Living alone is that training ground. Every day you're proving to yourself that you can stand, walk, and run without someone holding your hand. And when you master that, you carry it with you for life. One day, you might choose to share your life with someone again, but when you do, it will be from a place of strength, not dependence. And that's when relationships become powerful. When 2 self-reliant people choose each other, not because they're incomplete, but because they're already whole. Until you reach that point, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the chance to build that strength alone. When you live alone, you don't just control your schedule. You control the entire ecosystem. You exist in. Your environment isn't just walls and furniture. It's the air you breathe, the sounds you hear, the order or chaos you walk into at the end of the day. It's the tone that's set the moment you open your front door. Most people underestimate how much that affects their mental state, their productivity, and even their ambition. When you share space with someone, you share more than a lease or a mortgage. You share an atmosphere, and that atmosphere is shaped by their habits, their energy, their moods. Maybe they're clean, maybe they're messy, maybe they wake up early, maybe they stay up late, maybe they're upbeat and driven, or maybe they're constantly negative and dragging their feet. Whether you like it or not, those patterns start to leak into your own. Living alone eliminates that problem entirely. You set the tone, you set the pace, you set the vibe. If you want to wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym, come home, and work in silence until noon, no one's stopping you. If you want to work late into the night with music blasting, you can. If you want total silence, you can have that too. You're not negotiating for control over your own space. You own it. The beauty of that control is how quickly it compounds. When your environment matches your priorities, your habits stick faster. If you're trying to eat clean, you don't have someone stocking the fridge with junk food. If you're trying to save money, you don't have someone spending recklessly and pulling you off track. If you're trying to focus, you don't have background noise or constant interruptions. You're in a space designed for your success, not for compromise. People underestimate how much mental energy goes into managing someone else's energy. Even when it's unspoken, you're constantly aware of the other person. You notice when they're upset, you feel the tension when they're stressed. You might try to avoid triggering an argument, or you might feel guilty for not spending enough time with them. That's all energy you could be putting into your goals, your health, your peace. Living alone gives you that energy back. And let's be honest, sometimes you just need to recharge. Some people can't recharge in a shared environment. They can't fully relax if someone else is in the room. They can't get deep focus if they're listening for someone coming home. When you live alone, recharging isn't something you schedule. It's built into your life. You can power down whenever you need to without worrying about explaining yourself. This is especially important for protecting your focus. Focus is fragile. One interruption, one question, one request, one unexpected distraction can throw off an entire train of thought. When you control your environment, you can protect your focus like it's gold. You decide when you're available. You decide when the phone gets answered. You decide when the door gets opened. And that's not selfish, that's strategic. Your environment also shapes your creativity. The right lighting, the right organization, the right amount of noise or silence, these things matter. In a shared space, you might have to compromise on all of it. But when you live alone, your space becomes a reflection of your mind. If you need minimalism, you can have minimalism. If you need inspiration, you can fill your walls with quotes, art, or photos that push you forward. Every corner of your space can be intentional. And here's the deeper truth. When you take control of your environment, you start to realize how much of your life you were letting happen. By default, you see how many habits you picked up simply because they were convenient for someone else. You see how much clutter, noise, and distraction you tolerated because you didn't want to rock the boat. And once you've experienced the peace and clarity of an environment you control, you become very protective of it. That protection is key, because your environment is directly tied to your energy. Walk into a messy, chaotic space and you feel heavy. Walk into a clean, organized, inspiring space and you feel lighter, sharper, more in control. When you live alone, you're not just reacting to someone else's mess. You're creating the conditions you thrive in. That's not just comfort, that's performance. You think about athletes. They don't just train their bodies, they engineer their surroundings. Their diet, their schedule, their rest. All of it is protected from unnecessary interference. High performers in any field understand this. They control what they can control, because that's how you win. Living alone gives you that same advantage. You become the architect of your daily arena. It also makes you more aware of what drains your energy. Maybe you notice that certain music boosts your productivity, or that certain colors in your space make you calmer, or that keeping your phone in another room at night helps you sleep better. These are micro adjustments you can make instantly when you live alone. But in a shared space, you'd have to negotiate every single one. And let's be honest, most people don't win those negotiations consistently. Over time, the accumulation of control over your environment changes you. You stop tolerating unnecessary chaos in other parts of your life too. You stop putting up with toxic workplaces. You stop spending time in places that make you feel drained. You start seeking out people and situations that match the energy you want to keep. Your home becomes your training ground for living life on your terms. And once you've experienced this level of control and the energy it creates, it's almost impossible to go back, because you know what it feels like to walk into a space that fuels you instead of drains you. You know what it feels like to end your day in peace instead of in tension. You know how much faster you move toward your goals when your environment is set up for it. That's the power of living alone. You're not just in control of your space, you're in control of your energy. And when you control your energy, you control your output, you control your mood, you control the way you show up in the world. That's not a small thing, that's everything, because the world will always try to pull at you, distract you, and drain you. But when your home is your fortress, you can walk out the door every day fully charged, fully focused, and fully ready. And that's how you start winning, not by reacting to the world's chaos, but by building your own order first. When you strip away the noise, the distractions, and the constant negotiation that comes with sharing your life and space with another person, you discover something incredible. Your growth accelerates, not in small, gradual steps, but in leaps. Because when you live alone, there's nothing holding the wheel except your own hands. And that means every ounce of your time, energy, and focus can be aimed at building the life you want without compromise. Think about the way most people move through life. Their schedule isn't entirely theirs. Their priorities are constantly being shuffled to fit someone else's needs. Their downtime gets negotiated. Their work time gets interrupted. Even their goals have to be explained, justified, sometimes even defended. That constant friction slows people down. It's like trying to run with a parachute strapped to your back. You might still make progress, but you're not going to hit your top speed. Living alone cuts the parachute loose. You set your own pace. You decide how much time you put into your craft, your career, your health, your learning. You decide when to push and when to rest. And because you're not splitting that focus with someone else's priorities, you get results faster. If you want to work on your side business until 2 a.m., you can. If you want to wake up at 5 a.m. and dive into studying for a new certification, you can. There's no compromise, only execution. This is where people start to confuse living alone with isolation. But they're not the same thing. Isolation is when you cut yourself off from the world entirely. Living alone is about choosing your interactions intentionally. Instead of being locked into the same daily exchanges, you can seek out mentors, collaborators, and opportunities that align with your growth. You control who you spend time with, and that means you can surround yourself with people who inspire you instead of people who drain you. Here's the reality. Growth requires uninterrupted focus. It requires consistency. It requires deep work. The kind you can't achieve if you're constantly distracted by arguments, emotional turbulence, or someone else's demands. When you live alone, you create the conditions for that deep work to happen daily. And when you stack enough days like that, you start to outpace everyone else in your field. Not because you're smarter, not because you're luckier, but because you have the environment and the discipline to do the work. Others can't sustain. It's not just professional growth either. It's personal growth. Living alone forces you to spend time with yourself. You learn your patterns, your strengths, your weaknesses, your triggers. You can't hide from them because there's no one to distract you from them. That kind of self-awareness is priceless because you can't improve what you won't acknowledge. And when you know yourself that well, you can set better goals, make better decisions, and move with more intention. And here's where it gets interesting. When you live alone and commit to growth, you start building momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in life. Once you get moving in the right direction, every win builds on the last one. You land a new client, and that gives you the confidence to pitch to bigger ones. You get fitter, and that gives you more energy to tackle your projects. You learn a new skill, and that opens doors to opportunities you didn't even know existed. That momentum snowballs, and before you know it, you're in a completely different league from where you started. Most people never hit that momentum because their energy is too divided. They're constantly starting and stopping, making progress, and then losing ground because they have to deal with drama, compromise, or someone else's crisis. Living alone removes that stop and go pattern. You can stay in the zone for weeks, months, even years without interruption. That's when real transformation happens. You also become more adaptable without someone else to rely on. You get used to figuring things out on your own. That makes you faster at problem solving, which in turn makes you more confident to take risks. You're not waiting for consensus. You're not worried about whether someone else will be on board. You see an opportunity, you move on it. That speed is a huge advantage in a world where most people are still thinking about it while you're already halfway to the finish line. Another key advantage is the ability to invest in yourself without hesitation. You don't have to justify why you're spending money on a course, a trip, or equipment. You don't have to explain why you're dedicating your weekend to building something instead of socializing. Every resource you put into your growth is an investment you've chosen, without dilution. That accelerates results in ways most people don't understand until they've experienced it. The shift also happens internally. When you see yourself growing faster, you start expecting more from yourself. Your standards rise. You stop tolerating mediocrity in any area of your life, your work, your health, your relationships. You get used to winning, and that becomes your new normal. That's not arrogance, that's evolution. And once you've raised your baseline like that, going back to anything less feels impossible. Of course, this isn't just about grinding 24/7. Living alone gives you the flexibility to rest when you need it. Recovery is part of growth. And when you're in control, you can structure that recovery in a way that actually restores you. That means when you come back to the work, you're sharper, faster, and more creative. You're not burning out trying to meet someone else's timeline. You're running your own race at the pace that lets you win. And maybe the most important thing, living alone teaches you that your growth is your responsibility. No one else is going to push you. No one else is going to hold you accountable. You have to build that discipline yourself. That's the kind of self-leadership that carries over into every part of life. Whether you eventually choose to stay alone or enter a relationship later, that self-leadership makes you a stronger, more valuable, more unstoppable version of yourself. Because here's the truth, growth doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you create the right conditions and commit to showing up every single day. Living alone gives you those conditions, and if you use them well, you can do more in a few years than most people do in a decade. That's the kind of advantage you don't give up lightly. When you've built your life alone, truly built it, something shifts in the way you approach relationships. You no longer see them as lifelines. You no longer enter them out of fear of being alone. You no longer feel the need to grab onto the first person who shows you attention because you're desperate for validation. Instead, you start looking at relationships through a completely different lens, not as a requirement for your happiness, but as an optional enhancement to an already full and strong life. Most people don't realize how much their relationship choices are driven by weakness, not strength. They get into relationships because they feel incomplete. They want someone to fill a gap, fix a wound, give them a sense of security they haven't built for themselves. The problem is, when you choose from that place, you're vulnerable. You'll tolerate behavior you shouldn't. You'll stay in situations that drain you. You'll accept less than you deserve. Because the alternative, being alone, feels scarier. Living alone flips that script entirely. When you've proven to yourself that you can thrive solo, you stop being afraid of that alternative. You can build joy, stability, and fulfillment without depending on anyone else to provide it. And because you're not afraid, you become incredibly selective. You stop choosing people out of convenience. You stop making decisions from scarcity. You start asking the real questions. Does this person add to my life? Do they inspire me? Do they bring out my best? Do they align with the life I'm building? This changes everything about how you show up. In relationships, you're no longer negotiating from a position of need. You're negotiating from a position of power. You don't hand over your boundaries just to keep someone around. You don't shrink yourself to make them comfortable. You don't sacrifice your goals to protect their ego. You've worked too hard to build yourself to let someone come in and dismantle it. And here's the truth. People can feel that. They can feel when you don't need them. At first, it might intimidate some because you're not playing the usual game of emotional dependency. But for the right people, it's magnetic because strength recognizes strength. The healthiest relationships are built between two people who can stand alone but choose to stand together. That's where the magic happens. There's no control, no fear, no desperation, just mutual respect and alignment. Living alone also gives you the ability to walk away without hesitation when something isn't right. When you're dependent on someone emotionally, financially, or socially, leaving feels impossible. You tell yourself you have too much to lose. But when you've built your life to be complete on its own, Walking away isn't a loss. It's simply protecting what you've already built. You're not starting over from nothing. You're returning to a life you already love. This is why people who have mastered solitude have such unshakable confidence in relationships. They don't chase. They don't beg. They don't cling. They know their worth because they've seen what they can accomplish on their own. They're not afraid of losing someone because they're not afraid of being alone. And when you take that fear out of the equation, your standards naturally rise. You stop settling for mediocre connections just to avoid solitude. Another thing happens when you choose from strength. You're no longer impressed by surface level qualities. You're not swayed by charm without substance. You're not blinded by attraction if there's no alignment in values. You spend enough time alone to know exactly what matters to you, and you won't compromise on it. That clarity is one of the biggest gifts of living alone. It strips away the noise and lets you see people for who they really are without the fog of desperation clouding your judgment. And let's talk about respect. Not the kind people demand with words, but the kind they earn through how they live. When you've built your life by yourself, you command respect in a way that doesn't have to be loud or forceful. You carry yourself differently. You don't tolerate disrespect because you know you don't have to. That changes the way people treat you. They understand that your time, your energy, and your peace are valuable because you treat them that way. When you eventually choose to let someone into your life, it's because they bring something meaningful to the table. They match your pace. They share your vision. They respect your boundaries because they have their own. And instead of pulling each other down with emotional weight, you push each other higher. That's the kind of relationship that actually makes you stronger, not weaker. This is why living alone isn't just about solitude, it's about preparation. It's about building yourself into someone who doesn't just survive without a relationship, but thrives without one. Because when you do that, you ensure that if you ever do enter a relationship, it's not because you're trying to escape loneliness. It's because you're making a conscious, intentional choice to share your already fulfilling life with someone who's earned that place. That's a huge shift from how most people operate. Most people stumble into relationships and then try to grow themselves inside of them. They think they'll find themselves while constantly adjusting for someone else's needs. And sure, some people can do it, but it's harder, slower, and often more painful. Living alone gives you the space to do that growth without compromise. So when you finally meet someone who fits, you're not starting from a place of trying to fix yourself. You're starting from strength, confidence, and stability. And here's the last piece. When you're strong enough to be alone, you love differently. You don't love out of fear. You don't love because you're scared of what life will be like without them. You love because you genuinely choose to, because they add value, because they challenge you in the best ways. That kind of love is rare, and it's only possible when you first learn to stand alone. So yes, living alone is powerful for personal freedom, for self-reliance, for focus, but maybe the most underrated benefit is this. It gives you the ability to choose relationships not out of weakness, but out of absolute strength. And when you choose from that place, you don't just find someone, you find the right someone. So here's the truth. Living alone isn't about isolation. It's about liberation. It's about proving to yourself that you can build, you can thrive, you can win without leaning on anyone else to carry you there. It's about stripping away the noise and learning who you are when no one else is in the room. Because when you master that version of yourself, the one who doesn't need anyone's permission, validation, or approval, you become unstoppable. Freedom, self-reliance, control over your environment, accelerated growth, and the ability to choose relationships from a place of strength. These aren't just nice ideas. They're the building blocks of a life on your terms. And once you've lived that way, once you've breathed that kind of air, you will never again trade your peace for comfort or your future for company. People will try to tell you that being alone is a weakness, that you're missing out, that you need someone to be complete. Smile at them because you'll know something they don't. You've already built yourself whole. And when you choose to let someone in, it won't be because you need them. It will be because you want them and they've earned it. The world belongs to those who can stand alone and still stand tall. Be that person. Build that strength. Guard it. And live your life in a way that makes it crystal clear. You don't need to be in a relationship to be powerful. You already